I remember the morning like it was etched in fire. I had arrived at my son's house without warning, carrying nothing but a small bag and a heart full of hope. It was Thanksgiving, a day meant for family, for gratitude, for warmth. Instead, what greeted me was a storm I hadn't anticipated. As soon as I stepped inside, Amber, my daughter-in-law, spun toward me, her eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen in a long time, pure disdain. "She's just the cleaning lady," she spat, pointing directly at me, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room. "Don't talk to her." The words hit me like ice water, shocking my very core. I paused, clutching my bag tightly. I had raised Mark alone, poured decades of love, sacrifice, and guidance into him, and yet here I was, dismissed like a stranger in my own family. The grandchildren, Lily and Leo, glanced at me nervously, sensing the tension but unsure why the air had grown so thick. I wanted to step back, to retreat, to swallow the humiliation, but something inside me clenched. I realized that this wasn't just about Thanksgiving or a moment of rudeness. This was about everything. Every slight, every betrayal, every time I had been ignored, manipulated, or erased from my own life. I set my bag down and looked around the room, taking in the polished marble floors, the expensive furnishings, and the evidence of a family that prioritized appearances over truth. "Amber," I said softly, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." Her lips twisted, half in a sneer, half in disbelief. "Talk," she repeated. "About what? You're nothing to this family." Nothing. The words stung, but they also sparked something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. I would not leave, and I would not let them silence me. Mark appeared beside her, hesitant at first, caught between loyalty to his wife and the mother who had raised him. "Mom," he said, trying to sound conciliatory, "let's not make this worse." But I saw through the veneer of politeness. I knew that he had allowed this cruelty for far too long. My heart ached, but my mind sharpened. I knew the depth of their manipulation, and I knew it was time to reclaim my dignity. I asked for a chair, and once seated, I opened my bag and pulled out a manila folder. The children watched, wide-eyed, sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. I removed each document carefully: the deeds to my properties, corporate registrations, financial statements, and eventually, the damning record of every extravagant charge Mark and Amber had run up on my accounts over the last 6 months. Spa treatments, shopping sprees, luxury dinners, and vacations, all on my money, while they painted me to the world as penniless, as incapable, as unworthy of respect. The room fell into a stunned silence. Even the children seemed to hold their breath. I met Amber's gaze. "156,000 in 6 months," I said, my voice steady. "Do you have an explanation for this?" Her face paled, the mask of superiority crumbling. For a brief second, she seemed human, fragile, but then pride and fear wrestled it away, and she whispered, "Helen, let me explain." I shook my head, cutting her off before she could weave another lie. "Explain what?" I demanded. "Explain how you belittled my staff, called me unworthy, turned my own children against me, and planned to abandon me the moment I became inconvenient." Mark's hands shook as he stepped forward. "Mom, it's just a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice cracking. I looked at him, the boy I had nurtured, the man I had loved for 47 years. My gaze hardened. "No, Mark. This is not a misunderstanding. This is exactly what you and Amber wanted. A mother you could exploit, a grandmother you could manipulate, a source of money and free childcare with no respect in return. You wanted someone you could control without consequences." I reached for my phone, having anticipated this moment for weeks. Detective Miller's number was saved and ready. "Detective Miller, this is Helen Montgomery. I'm ready for you to come now." Amber's face drained of color, and Mark froze. The tension was suffocating, and the guests, oblivious to the brewing storm, began shifting nervously in their seats. Amber's wine glass tipped, red liquid spilling like a silent scream across the white tablecloth. "You're calling the police on your own family," she shrieked, panic overtaking her arrogance. I met her eyes steadily. "I am calling the police on those who defrauded me. Being family does not grant immunity from the law." Mark's voice wavered. "Think about the children, Mom. They don't deserve this." I responded with a clarity forged through years of betrayal. "You should have thought of them before turning them against me, before placing inheritance above love and respect." Guests quietly began gathering their belongings, sensing the collapse of civility. Amber, desperate, hissed one last warning. "You'll be alone forever?" I smiled, an unfamiliar calm washing over me. "I have been alone for years. I said softly. The difference now is it's my choice. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Detective Miller and his partner entered, and suddenly, Amber and Mark seemed small, cornered, vulnerable. Messes. Montgomery. Miller asked gently, "Are these the individuals you wish to press charges against?" I looked at Mark, searching for a hint of remorse. There was none, only the raw reflection of who he had become. The first wave of justice had begun, but this was just the start. Little did they know, the legal storm I had prepared would not just expose their greed. It would unravel everything they had built, leaving them powerless, while I reclaimed not only my dignity, but the life I had always deserved. The legal wheels moved faster than I ever anticipated. David, my longtime lawyer and confidant, had meticulously prepared every piece of evidence. Ironically, the very money Mark and Amber had exploited to hire a lawyer for themselves now paid for their own downfall. When their attorney reviewed our case, he immediately recognized the strength of the documentation. Everything from credit card statements to financial records and witness testimonies left no room for denial. His advice to them was blunt: settle now, take the plea deal, or face a full trial that could devastate their lives. Mark and Amber were stunned. Their arrogance, so carefully cultivated over years, crumbled under the weight of proof. They realized too late that they had underestimated the woman they dismissed as just the cleaning lady. The charges, credit card fraud and financial elder abuse, carried severe legal consequences. Yet, the real damage would not be measured in fines or restitution. It would be the exposure of their lies, the unmasking of every false story they had spun to friends, colleagues, and even our extended family. Within a week, the local newspapers ran headlines that made my heart swell with quiet vindication. Prominent businesswoman uncovers family financial fraud during holiday stay, and grandmother fights back against exploitation, a story of courage and justice. I had not spoken to a single reporter. I had not written a press release. I didn't have to. The facts spoke with their own undeniable force. For once, truth and justice moved hand in hand, and I could finally watch without fear. Mark and Amber's access to all Montgomery hospitality accounts was immediately revoked. Their credit cards were canceled, the mortgage payments I had been quietly covering were terminated, and within weeks they were forced to downsize drastically. From their sprawling estate, they moved to a modest apartment across town, the luxurious lifestyle they had so eagerly claimed now stripped away. Socially, the blow was even more devastating. Memberships to exclusive clubs were revoked, private school tuition was demanded upfront, and friends who had once thrived on the perks I provided turned away, leaving them isolated in a world they thought they controlled. I observed all of this from the quiet refuge of my penthouse, a haven I had earned through decades of hard work. Relief washed over me, tempered only by the sadness of recognizing the depth of the betrayal. My grandchildren were still young, and though the poisoned sound by Mark and Amber lingered, I hoped that time might allow them to see the truth and perhaps one day heal. I had already set up trust funds for Lily and Leo to cover their college tuition, managed by the Montgomery Foundation. They would have security, regardless of whether Mark and Amber had taught them respect or integrity. 3 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, a letter arrived. The envelope was shaky, almost pleading, and the handwriting belonged to Amber. "Dear Helen," it began, "I hope you can forgive us. We have learned our lesson and want to make amends. The children miss their grandmother, and I now realize how wrong we were. Please give us another chance to be the family you deserve." I read it twice, then neatly filed it with the court documents and police reports. It wasn't an apology. It was a subtle attempt to regain access to what they had lost: my money, my influence, my presence in their lives. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned my energy toward building the life I should have been living all along. I sold 2 smaller properties and used the proceeds to establish the Montgomery Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to stopping elder abuse and supporting seniors who had been abandoned or exploited by their families. The top floor of my newest hotel in downtown Miami became our headquarters, a beacon for those who had been silenced or shamed. Every day, I poured myself into the work, finding purpose in a way I had never experienced. The team I assembled became my real family. Dr. Linda Vargas, our gerontologist, stepped into the role of medical director and reminded me of the nurturing I had once offered to my own children. Sergio Ortiz, our advocacy lawyer, exemplified the integrity that Mark had rejected. Sophia Ramos, who had been financially abused by her own relatives, guided our support groups, offering wisdom shaped by lived experience. Together, we helped dozens of seniors reclaim their dignity, offering legal aid, financial counseling, and a community built on respect rather than obligation. Though my heart still ached over my grandchildren, hope began to creep back. I imagined a future where Lily and Leo might grow to understand the truth, free from the distortions Mark and Amber had taught them. The pain of betrayal had been profound, but it had also created the space for transformation, both in my life and, potentially, in theirs. The foundation soon grew, not just in numbers but in reputation. Word spread that the Montgomery Foundation didn't just provide assistance, it empowered its participants to speak, to act, and to heal. Our programs began to attract seniors from across the state, each with stories of silence, exploitation, and heartbreak. And slowly, I started seeing my own worth reflected back in the lives we touched. But as the foundation flourished, and my life took on a new purpose, an unexpected letter would arrive, one that would make me question everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and forgiveness. The unexpected letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where sunlight barely penetrates the city skyline. I picked it up from my doorman and studied the envelope, noting immediately that the handwriting was unfamiliar. My pulse quickened slightly, not from fear, but from curiosity. Inside, a single sheet of paper had been folded neatly. I unfolded it, and the words leapt off the page with a quiet urgency. Mrs. Montgomery, I know this message may be out of place, but I am writing because my conscience will not allow me to remain silent any longer. My name is Leo Montgomery. I am your grandson. I am now old enough to understand some of the truths that were hidden from me. I have made mistakes, followed lies, and misunderstood the woman who has loved me unconditionally. I want to know you. I want to make things right. Tears welled in my eyes as I read the letter over and over. It had been years since I had felt this kind of raw, unfiltered hope. Leo was reaching out, not for money, not because of guilt, but because he was seeking connection. For the first time in what felt like decades, I realized that the damage Mark and Amber had caused might be repairable, at least in part, through the next generation. I set the letter aside and thought about the weeks following our confrontation at Serenity Shores. Mark and Amber had vanished from my life almost immediately after their arrests. Amber moved out of state, quickly remarried, and had no contact with the children. Mark had been humbled by the legal consequences and the public exposure of his lies. Yet, despite everything, I had never imagined that Leo would emerge from this chaos with clarity, empathy, and a willingness to build a bridge rather than burn it. I called David, who had been instrumental throughout the legal proceedings, and asked for his advice. "Grandmother, I think you should respond," he said gently, "but not in the way they expect. Let it be about connection, not money or obligation. Let it be about choice and understanding." I nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. This was no longer about retribution. It was about planting seeds of truth and integrity where deceit had once flourished. Over the next few days, I drafted a letter to Leo, carefully choosing words that conveyed my love, my hurt, and my willingness to reconnect on his terms. I wrote, "Dear Leo, I have waited for the day you would reach out, and now that it has come, I want you to know that I am here. I am proud of the young person you are becoming, and I welcome the chance to know you, not through the lens of what others have said, but through the truth we can create together." Sending that letter felt like a leap of faith. I had spent years guarding my heart, bracing myself against betrayal and disappointment. And yet, the act of opening a door, even slightly, brought a weightless joy I had almost forgotten existed. Meanwhile, the Montgomery Foundation continued to grow. Our programs expanded to new cities, bringing hope to seniors who had been silenced and exploited. We launched financial literacy workshops, legal clinics, and wellness retreats that combined luxury accommodations with therapeutic guidance. Serenity Shores had become a symbol of healing, a place where the very rooms that once hosted my humiliation now echoed with laughter, conversation, and empowerment. The Reclaim Your Life retreats were particularly transformative. Seniors who had endured years of emotional and financial abuse came to heal, to find their voices, and to reclaim their independence. We created a community where respect, dignity, and choice were paramount, and in witnessing their transformation, I found new purpose. It was a life I had long dreamed of, but had never fully embraced until now. Amid the success of the foundation, I began preparing for my first in-person meeting with Leo. I wanted it to be unhurried, private, and filled with opportunities for honest conversation. When he arrived at my penthouse, my heart leapt at the sight of him. He was taller than I remembered, with his father's dark hair but eyes that held something entirely his own, a kindness and curiosity that Mark had long buried beneath arrogance and entitlement. We spent hours talking, not just about the past, but about dreams, hopes, and what it meant to grow up understanding the consequences of choices. Leo shared stories about school, his friends, and the lingering questions about his parents' actions. I listened without judgment, recognizing that the healing process needed patience, love, and time. But as I opened my heart to Leo and began rebuilding the bond we had lost, an unforeseen challenge emerged. One that would test everything I had learned about trust, resilience, and the true meaning of family. The days leading up to Leo's visit had been filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I cleaned my penthouse meticulously, though not out of vanity. Rather, it was a symbolic act, a way to prepare the space for a fresh start, a clean slate for a relationship that had been tarnished by years of lies and neglect. I placed fresh flowers on the dining table and arranged the chairs so our conversation could flow freely, without any barriers between us. When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped a beat. I opened it to find Leo standing there, backpack slung casually over one shoulder, a mixture of nerves and determination in his expression. The moment our eyes met, I felt a bridge forming across the years, one that had been nearly destroyed by deception, but now began to mend with each quiet heartbeat. "Grandma Helen," he said softly, almost hesitantly. "Thank you for letting me come." "Leo," I replied, taking his hand gently. "I've wanted this for a long time." "Come in, let's talk." We settled into the living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the floor, to ceiling windows, casting golden light over the space. Leo began by asking questions about my life, my work, and even the family he barely remembered. I told him stories of the hotels I had built, the struggles I faced as a single mother raising Mark, and the lessons I had learned along the way. I didn't shy away from the pain caused by his parents' actions, but I framed it as a lesson rather than a weapon. "It wasn't your fault," I said softly, when he hesitated, as if holding back tears. "You were just a child, and the adults around you made poor choices. But you have the chance to understand, to learn, and to choose differently." Leo nodded, his eyes glistening. "I want to understand, Grandma. I don't want to repeat the mistakes my parents made. I want to be someone who builds, not destroys." His words filled me with a quiet hope I hadn't dared to feel in years. For so long, I had feared that Mark's betrayal and Amber's manipulations would leave permanent scars on my grandchildren. But here was Leo, reaching out with honesty and a desire to change, and it reminded me that even in the darkest times, the next generation could still shine with integrity. Over the next few hours, we shared photographs, letters, and memories. I showed him images of Mark as a boy, his mischievous smile, and the early days when our family had been filled with laughter. I explained the challenges we had faced, the mistakes his father and Amber had made, and the consequences that had followed. I wanted Leo to see the full picture, not as a story of anger, but as a lesson in resilience, integrity, and the importance of standing up for oneself. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and occasionally pausing to reflect. At one point, he looked directly at me and said, "Grandma, I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner. I want to be better, for you and for myself." I pulled him into a hug, feeling the warmth of a bond that had been stretched thin, but never completely broken. In that moment, I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could nurture the present and guide the future. The relationship I rebuilt with Leo would be grounded in truth, trust, and mutual respect, the things that had been lacking for so long. In the following weeks, Leo became a regular presence at my penthouse. We would sit together, working on small projects, discussing his interests in hotel management, and exploring ways he could get involved with the Montgomery Foundation. It was a slow, steady process filled with laughter, learning, and moments of quiet reflection. Yet, despite this newfound connection, I remained cautious. The wounds inflicted by Mark and Amber were deep, and I knew that reconciliation with them, or even full trust in Leo, would take time. I had learned the hard way that love without boundaries was dangerous, and I was determined to protect my heart while nurturing the next generation. Meanwhile, the foundation continued to flourish. Our programs expanded to multiple cities, with each new participant reminding me why I had chosen to take control of my life and stand up against abuse. The Reclaim Your Life retreats became particularly transformative, offering seniors not just a luxurious escape, but also workshops in financial literacy, legal rights, and emotional well-being. Seeing participants regain their independence and confidence reminded me that the greatest power lies in self-respect and knowledge. Leo quickly became involved, assisting with events, helping organize workshops, and interacting with seniors who were eager to learn from his youthful perspective. It was clear that he was not just participating for personal gain. He genuinely wanted to contribute, to be part of something meaningful, and to honor the lessons he had learned from his grandmother. But as Leo grew more involved, a new complication began to emerge, one that threatened to test both our bond and the very foundation I had built to protect others from betrayal. What happened next would force me to confront the past once more, in ways I had never anticipated. A few weeks after Leo began helping with the foundation, I noticed subtle changes in Mark. He had always been the master of manipulation, but now he was lurking in the shadows of my life, attempting to insert himself where he had been shut out. It started with polite emails, then phone calls, all framed as concern for the grandchildren. "I just want to make sure they're happy," he wrote, but I could feel the undertone. Mark was testing boundaries, probing for weakness, looking for any crack he could exploit. I discussed it with Dr. Vargas, who shook her head slowly. "Helen, you've been patient and compassionate, but don't let guilt or nostalgia trick you. Your instincts about Mark are valid. He hasn't changed the way Leo has." Sitting in my office, reviewing letters and emails, I realized how crucial it was to teach Leo not just about integrity, but also about protecting oneself from toxic influences, even family. "Leo," I said one afternoon, "you need to understand that not all people who claim to love you will act in your best interest. Sometimes, people's love is conditional, tied to what you can give them rather than who you are." He nodded, absorbing every word. "I know, Grandma. That's why I want to do things differently. I don't want to be like Dad. I want to build trust, not break it." While Mark was subtly reappearing, Amber had quietly moved out of state, as I had suspected she would. Her absence brought a strange mix of relief and unresolved tension. It was almost too quiet without her constant manipulations and demands. The peace allowed the foundation to flourish further, but every time a new program launched, I was reminded of the chaos that had preceded it. I knew that rebuilding a life after betrayal wasn't a straight path. It had curves, obstacles, and unexpected challenges. One morning, a call from our legal advisor, Sergio, alerted me to a new issue. "Helen, we've received an anonymous tip regarding some of the other properties you sold," he said carefully. "Apparently, someone is questioning whether the sales were conducted properly. Nothing criminal, but it could stir public attention." I frowned, feeling the weight of vigilance that never truly left me. "Who would do that?" I asked. "Could be anyone who resents your success, or someone from Mark and Amber's circle," Sergio suggested. I sighed, knowing that standing up for oneself means constantly defending what you've earned, even against those you once called family. I shared the news with Leo, who looked concerned but determined. "Grandma, we'll handle it together. You've taught me how to fight for what's right. I can help." He stepped up in ways that mirrored my younger self, resourceful, determined, and unwilling to accept dishonesty. Together, we reviewed every document, every transaction, preparing ourselves for the possibility of scrutiny. It wasn't just about defending wealth. It was about protecting a legacy of integrity and the well-being of countless seniors who relied on the foundation. During this time, Lily, my granddaughter, began sending short messages. They were cautious, testing the waters, but they were enough to remind me that bridges, even those damaged by deceit, could sometimes be rebuilt. Leo encouraged me not to rush anything. "Let them come on their own terms," he said wisely. "The truth and your integrity will always be your allies." I watched Leo grow not just in maturity, but in empathy. He became a bridge between generations, helping other staff members mentor younger volunteers, and sharing the lessons he had learned from his family's mistakes. His presence reminded me daily that the cycle of manipulation and entitlement could be broken, and that sometimes the strongest bonds are forged through adversity, not ease. Then, one afternoon, as I was preparing for a major foundation retreat, a visitor arrived unexpectedly. It was a journalist from a respected newspaper, someone who had covered elder abuse and family exploitation stories in the past. Mrs. Montgomery. She began politely. We've heard about the success of the Reclaim Your Life retreats, and we'd like to feature your work. But we're also aware of your family's past involvement. Are you willing to speak on the record? I paused, considering the weight of my decision. Public exposure could help the foundation educate others and prevent abuse, but it could also reignite old wounds. I'll speak, I said finally, but only about the lessons learned and the work we're doing now. The past is a warning, not a spectacle. The journalist nodded, sensing the strength behind my words. Understood. Your perspective will help countless people who are still suffering in silence. That night, after the interview, I sat on my balcony with Leo. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples. Grandma, he said, I think people need to see how you stood up for yourself. They need to know that being alone doesn't mean being powerless. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words. Indeed, solitude could be empowering if chosen wisely, and the lessons we teach the next generation can ripple outward in ways we can't always predict. But even as the foundation thrived and Leo grew stronger, the shadows of Mark and his lingering influence were far from gone. What happened next would force me to confront not only my past, but the possibility that betrayal could strike from an entirely unexpected direction, right when I thought I had finally achieved peace. The following morning, I received a call that made my heart tighten. A familiar number from a hotel in another state. Mrs. Montgomery. This is the manager at the Palm Harbor Inn, said the voice. We've had a guest here who claims they have information about someone close to you, and it concerns potential fraud. I felt a chill. Could this be another attempt by Mark or Amber to manipulate situations from afar? Or was it someone else entirely, trying to expose wrongdoing for reasons I couldn't yet understand? I thanked the manager politely and ended the call, then immediately asked Sergio to start an investigation. Even in my 70s, I knew that vigilance was a crucial skill for survival, not just for money, but for dignity, reputation, and peace of mind. Leo noticed my tension. Grandma, are you okay? He asked, leaning against my office doorway. I'll be fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I can't ignore this. Someone might be trying to stir trouble. Over the next few days, emails, letters, and even an anonymous package arrived. Each contained vague threats or insinuations, warning that exposing certain financial discrepancies could ruin the foundation, my reputation, and the legacy I had worked decades to build. I refused to panic. Instead, I convened a meeting with Dr. Vargas, Sergio, and Sarah, my trusted team. We've faced challenges before, I said. We'll face this one too. But we won't be bullied or intimidated. We will investigate, verify facts, and respond strategically. No fear, no rash decisions. Sarah, ever perceptive, added, Helen, if it's connected to your family, it might be a ploy to regain control or provoke a reaction. We need to stay calm, document everything, and let the law handle it. Sergio began tracing the source of the package and emails. Within days, he uncovered something surprising. The threats weren't from Mark or Amber. They were coming from a former business associate who had once worked with me in the early hotel expansions. Someone I had cut ties with decades ago. The motive, revenge for perceived slights and jealousy of my success. I exhaled, relieved yet reminded of the fragility of peace. Betrayal, it seemed, could come from anywhere, even from someone I hadn't thought about in years. But this time, I had learned to stand firm. I refused to let fear dictate my life. During this tense period, Leo stepped up in ways that astonished me. He handled communications with calm efficiency, learning to discern genuine threats from empty intimidation. One evening, he said, Grandma, I think this is a lesson too. It's not just about protecting the foundation or our finances. It's about resilience, about learning that standing up for what's right will always attract attention, both good and bad. But we must persevere. I nodded, marveling at how far he had come. In his eyes, I saw the reflection of my younger self, determined, clever, and unafraid to confront the world. He had absorbed lessons I had learned the hard way and was applying them with clarity and courage. Meanwhile, the Reclaim Your Life retreats were gaining traction. Word of mouth from participants spread across social media and local news, bringing inquiries from seniors nationwide. Each person who came carried stories of financial exploitation, neglect, or emotional abuse, and each story strengthened my resolve. The retreats became more than healing sessions, they became a movement. And yet, despite all this progress, the shadow of my past with Mark and Amber lingered. My grandchildren were slowly re-entering my life, Leo, cautiously, and Lily, sporadically. Each interaction reminded me of how fragile trust could be and how easily it could be shattered. One afternoon, I received a message from Lily. It was brief, almost hesitant. "Grandma, can we talk this weekend?" My heart lifted, but I reminded myself to tread carefully. Trust had to be rebuilt, not demanded. As I prepared for the weekend visit, I reflected on the journey so far. From the humiliation in that hotel dining room, to the legal battles, to building a foundation that gave me purpose. I had transformed. I was no longer the passive target of manipulation. I was a woman who had reclaimed her life, her power, and her voice. Yet, deep down, I knew this was far from the end of challenges. Life had a way of testing boundaries, even after we thought we had learned every lesson. And sometimes, the hardest battles were not against strangers or schemers, but against the ghosts of our own family. As the weekend approached and I awaited Lily's arrival, an unexpected phone call changed everything. The voice on the other end was calm, familiar, and yet completely unanticipated. What they said next would threaten not only my foundation, but the fragile peace I had fought so hard to build, and force me to confront a choice I never thought I would face at my age. The phone call had come late that evening, just as I was reviewing grant applications for the foundation. "Mrs. Montgomery," said the calm, measured voice. "My name is Victor Kane. I represent an organization that has been monitoring financial abuse cases nationwide. We've recently come across activity linked to your former family associates that could pose legal and reputational risks to your foundation. I think it's urgent we speak in person." My heart skipped a beat. "Victor, I'm listening. Please explain," I said, trying to maintain composure. He continued, "It appears that while Mark and Amber are no longer in direct contact, there are lingering transactions and potential claims being filed in their names. Someone might be trying to use your history with them as leverage against the foundation. They've identified gaps in public records and are spreading rumors that could jeopardize donor trust." I took a deep breath. I had been through deception before, but the thought that my family's past could now threaten the work I had poured my life into was unsettling. "Leo, can you come in here?" I called, and within minutes, he was at my side, his expression attentive, protective. "Grandma, what's going on?" he asked, eyes sharp. I handed him the call log. "It seems that trouble has a way of lingering," I said. "Even when we think it's gone, there's someone ready to exploit it." Leo read the notes carefully. "We can't ignore this, but we've handled worse. Let's treat this like any other case. Document, verify, and respond strategically. Fear has no place in decisions we make from principle." We convened with Sergio, who had already begun preliminary research into the claims Victor mentioned. "If this is connected to Mark and Amber, it's likely an indirect attempt," he said, "either someone holding a grudge or someone hoping to profit from their downfall. Either way, we are fully prepared to counteract it. Evidence is on our side." Days turned into a week of careful investigation. Phone records were analyzed, emails traced, and public filings examined. Each time a thread led to a dead end, I felt my pulse settle. This wasn't about vengeance or family drama. It was about protecting the mission I had built. Meanwhile, the Foundation's retreats continued to grow. Word of our program spread through local media, bringing in seniors from multiple states. Each participant carried stories of neglect, financial betrayal, or emotional abuse. Yet, each also left with hope. Listening to them, I realized that my personal journey was inseparable from my work. My story had become a beacon for others, and the fight against exploitation was bigger than any one family dispute. Then came the letter from an unexpected source. It was a lawyer representing a distant cousin I had not seen in years. They had learned about the foundation and were offering support, but included a subtle warning. "Given past family issues, I advise caution in public communications and financial transparency. Not all relatives have intentions aligned with yours." I sighed. Family. Even when you remove toxic individuals, the echoes remain. Yet I felt no fear. I had learned the hard way that control comes not from anger or resentment, but from boundaries, strategy, and integrity. One afternoon, as I walked through the hotel's lobby, now transformed into a hub for foundation activities, Leo approached me with a folder. "Grandma, I think you should see this." he said quietly. Inside were messages from participants in the retreats, letters, emails, and small tokens of appreciation. Stories of regained independence, newfound confidence, and families repaired after years of neglect. And among them was a short note from Lily. Grandma, I'm trying to understand everything now. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Can we start over slowly? My heart ached and swelled at the same time. Despite all the chaos, the hurt, and the betrayal, here was a bridge forming, a fragile, tentative link, but a link nonetheless. Leo glanced up at me. Grandma, whatever happens with this Victor Kane situation, we have something stronger than fear or manipulation, transparency, preparation, and integrity. Those are unbreakable. I nodded, feeling both pride and relief. My grandson had become a reflection of all the lessons I had fought to teach, and in that, I found reassurance. Yet the conversation with Victor Kane lingered in my mind. Someone was moving in the shadows, and while I had faced Mark and Amber with courage, this was a different kind of challenge, one that required a new level of vigilance and strategic thinking. That evening, as the city lights shimmered across the bay, I reflected on the journey I had taken. From being dismissed, belittled, and exploited, to standing tall as the architect of my own life and the protector of countless seniors, I had transformed. Yet, I also knew the lesson of history: the past has a way of sneaking back if you allow complacency. Just as I resolved to meet Victor Kane in person the next day, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't a call, it was a short video clip. The content was brief, but what it revealed made my blood run cold. Someone had been inside the Foundation's records, and the truth in that video would force me to confront a betrayal I never expected. And someone far closer than I realized. The video clip was short, just 30 seconds, but it carried a weight that no words could match. I watched it again and again, my hands trembling slightly. Someone, whose face was deliberately cropped out, was sitting at a computer terminal, scrolling through the Foundation's financial files. It wasn't just curiosity. The precision and speed suggested familiarity, as if the person knew exactly what to look for. Leo stood beside me, his face tight with concern. "Grandma, do you recognize that setup?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "I don't know. But whoever this is, they know what they're doing, and they're looking for something very specific." Sergio, who had been reviewing our cybersecurity protocols earlier that morning, walked into the room. "I've already taken steps to trace the source," he said. "But if this is someone internal, someone with access or prior knowledge of your operations, it complicates things. They could be testing vulnerabilities, or worse, trying to plant evidence." Plant evidence. The words echoed ominously in my mind. For years, I had fought against deceit, manipulation, and exploitation. I had believed that once Mark and Amber were dealt with, the worst of it was over. But this was something else entirely. I remembered the chaos of that fateful dinner at Serenity Shores Resort, the humiliation, the shock, and the cold satisfaction that came with finally setting boundaries. I had believed that the damage was contained, that the Foundation was safe from the ghosts of my family's betrayal. Now, I realized that vigilance had to be constant. Leo placed a hand on my shoulder. "Grandma, whatever this is, we handle it like we always have, step by step. First, assess. Then, respond. Don't let fear guide your actions." I nodded, drawing strength from his calm determination. "You're right, Leo. Panic never solved anything. Strategy does. Evidence does. Patience does." The next day, Victor Kane arrived in person. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, with an air of authority that immediately commanded respect. We met in the conference room overlooking the Miami skyline. The sunlight glinted off the glass, casting long reflections on the polished table. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "thank you for meeting me on short notice. The situation is delicate, but I believe with proper handling, it can be contained without damage to the Foundation or your reputation." "Go on," I said, folding my hands calmly. Victor pulled out a folder and began outlining a network of suspicious activity. Several anonymous complaints had been filed under the guise of former donors or beneficiaries, each alleging mismanagement or fraud within the Foundation. None of the claims held up under scrutiny, but the timing suggested coordination. Whoever was behind this had done their homework. Leo and Sergio leaned over the documents. "It's thorough," Sergio said, tapping a page. "They've pulled old transactions, donor information, and even internal staff schedules. They want leverage, probably to intimidate you or to extract money." Victor nodded. "Exactly. And if it isn't addressed quickly, even these baseless claims could gain traction online, potentially deterring donors or participants in your programs. I felt a familiar surge of determination. This was not the first time someone had tried to use fear against me. The difference now was that I had allies, structure, and an unshakable clarity of purpose. Then we act, I said, my voice steady. We expose them. We show the truth. No ambiguity. No hesitation. Victor smiled slightly. I expected nothing less. I'll coordinate with your team to fortify cybersecurity, verify donor communications, and prepare a public statement that counters these attacks decisively. Over the following week, the Foundation went into what I called a defense mode. Cybersecurity protocols were tightened, files encrypted, and access logs carefully monitored. Donors and program participants were reassured directly through personalized communications. Leo and I met daily, reviewing every step to ensure nothing was overlooked. Then came the breakthrough. One of the anonymous complaints had been traced to a device registered to a former employee who had left the Foundation under amicable terms, but who had been in close contact with someone from Mark and Amber's old social circle. The revelation sent a chill down my spine. Someone from my past was actively trying to infiltrate the life I had rebuilt. Leo looked at me with a mixture of worry and resolve. Grandma, it's them. Or at least, someone still connected to them. We can anticipate moves now. We have the advantage of knowing they are desperate and sloppy under pressure. I drew a slow, deliberate breath. Then we prepare for the next move. Let them think they can intimidate us, but show them that integrity and vigilance are stronger than deceit and fear. Late that night, as I reviewed the final logs of the day, a new alert popped up on the screen, an attempted breach originating from within the hotel itself. The intruder was inside the building, moving toward files that could expose the Foundation's most sensitive information. Whoever it was, they were bold and dangerously close. I froze as the alert blinked red on my screen. Someone was inside the building. My heart pounded, but my mind went immediately into action mode. Years of running businesses and dealing with manipulative people had prepared me for this. I wasn't about to let anyone compromise the foundation I had built from scratch. Leo, I called quietly, grab your phone. Sergio, we need you in the security room immediately. Within moments, the three of us were in the control center, screens illuminating our faces in an eerie glow. Victor's team was on call, remotely guiding us as we monitored the intruder's movements. Footage from the hallways showed a shadowed figure gliding through the corridors, moving with purpose. Whoever this was, they knew the layout perfectly. Grandma, they're heading toward the administrative offices. Leo whispered, gripping my hand tightly. That's where all the Foundation's records are. I felt a surge of anger. This was more than intimidation. It was an attack on everything I had fought for, everything I had stood up for. I couldn't let fear control me. I wouldn't. Lock the doors to the offices, I instructed, and activate silent alarms. We're not confronting them head on, at least not yet. We need to catch them in the act. The intruder paused briefly outside the main office door, glancing around nervously. From our vantage point, we could see the figure pull out a small device, likely to bypass electronic locks. Leo's jaw tightened. They're professionals, he murmured. They didn't just stumble in. Sergio shook his head. Not entirely. Professionals don't leave fingerprints all over the place. Whoever this is, they're precise but reckless under pressure. We can trap them. I felt my pulse steady. Years ago, I might have panicked. But now I had experience, foresight, and determination on my side. I guided the team in real time, coordinating with building security and law enforcement to ensure no one would be harmed. The intruder finally breached the office door. I watched the monitors, fighting back the urge to rush in myself. The shadow rifled through files, scanning folders, typing rapidly on the terminal. My stomach tightened as I saw the potential for disaster. Then Leo leaned closer, pointing to a small red button on the wall. Grandma, if we activate the lock override, we can seal the office. They won't get out until police arrive. I nodded. Do it. With a mechanical hum, the office doors locked automatically. The intruder looked up, realization dawning too late. Panic replaced their calm demeanor, and in that moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in their movements, almost like they had expected me to cower. But I didn't. Police officers arrived moments later, moving swiftly and efficiently. The intruder tried to flee, but was cornered and taken into custody without incident. When the lights were finally brightened, The face of the person caught made my blood run cold. It was someone I had trusted long ago, a minor associate from Mark and Amber's social circle who had taken orders after they were removed from our lives. Victor's voice was calm but firm as he explained the situation. They intended to steal files to use against the Foundation or to pressure you financially. Their access was limited, but they were audacious enough to believe they could get away with it. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of relief and residual anger. Years of manipulation, exploitation, and betrayal had culminated in this moment, and yet I realized something crucial: fear didn't control me anymore. My past experiences had hardened me, given me clarity. I had built a life that no shadow from the past could dismantle. Leo reached for my hand again, his presence grounding me. Grandma, you handled that brilliantly. They thought they could intimidate us, but they underestimated your resilience. I smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. Resilience, yes. And also vigilance. Complacency is dangerous. That's a lesson Mark and Amber never seemed to understand. In the following days, we fortified the Foundation further. Staff received additional training on security, access protocols were updated, and donors were personally reassured that their contributions were safe. The intruder's arrest made headlines locally, and rather than embarrassment, it became a story of courage and vigilance. Through all of this, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and attempts to undermine everything I cared about. Now, I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was ensuring that no one else under the Foundation's care would ever face the same vulnerability. And then, one afternoon, as I reviewed the files on potential expansion programs for the Foundation, a small envelope arrived at my desk. The handwriting looked hesitant, almost familiar. I tore it open, and inside was a note from someone I never thought I would hear from again: Mark. The words were brief, cautious, and carefully chosen. He didn't beg, he didn't demand. Instead, he acknowledged mistakes, hinted at regret, and cautiously suggested a desire to reconcile in the distant future. I held the note for a long time, feeling the weight of decades of hurt and lessons learned. The choice was mine. I could forgive, I could rebuild a relationship, but only on terms of respect and understanding, not entitlement. Just as I placed the note in my personal safe, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed an unknown number. A calm, deliberate voice said, "Mrs. Montgomery, you may think the threats are over, but someone from the past still has unfinished business." The voice on the line was unsettling, calm but edged with a quiet menace. "We've been watching, Mrs. Montgomery. You've been careful, but care isn't enough. Some debts from the past don't disappear. They only wait." I gripped the phone tightly, my mind racing. I had faced manipulators, thieves, and even family who turned against me, but this felt different. This was someone patient, calculating, someone who knew my patterns and weaknesses. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. A quiet chuckle echoed on the line. "Someone who remembers. Someone who knows how much you've overcome, and how vulnerable you can still be. I suggest you reconsider your next steps. We'll be in touch." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, heart hammering. Leo, who had been nearby working on a grant proposal for the Foundation, looked at me with concern. "Grandma, what was that?" "Someone from the past." I replied slowly, my voice steadying as I calmed myself. "Someone who thinks they can shake what I've built, but they don't understand the difference between fear and preparation." I knew immediately that I couldn't face this alone. I called Sergio, our trusted lawyer, and Victor, the security consultant who had saved us during the intruder incident. Both arrived within the hour, bringing calm and expertise with them. Together, we analyzed the situation, traced patterns, and reinforced all our security systems. Days passed with heightened vigilance. Every delivery, every call, every visitor was scrutinized. Leo stayed close, offering support, but also reminding me of the lessons I had learned. Vigilance was not paranoia, and strength was not fearlessness. It was preparedness. Amidst this tension, I realized something profound. All the years I had allowed manipulation and exploitation to shadow my life were over. I had rebuilt my family in my way, through the Foundation and through Leo's cautious but genuine reconnection. No one would compromise that, not even shadows from the past. Yet, even in the calm, the question lingered: what did this mysterious figure want? Revenge? Money? Or simply to remind me of the vulnerability I had once shown? I couldn't let curiosity or fear control me. I focused instead on action. Surveillance was increased. Secure communication channels were established, and every legal safeguard I could enact was in place. Nothing would catch us unprepared. Then, a week later, I received another letter in the mail. This one was typed, no handwriting to betray identity, and inside was a single sentence. The truth you think you hold is fragile. Someone will remind you of that soon. I didn't panic. Instead, I folded the letter and placed it in a locked file with the previous threats. It was clear whoever this person was, they thrived on fear and control. I had lived too long under the weight of manipulation to allow it again. Leo, sensing my resolve, whispered, "Grandma, you've come so far. They're testing us, but they're not winning." I smiled, resting a hand on his shoulder. "They never will. Every step they take to intimidate us only strengthens the foundation we've built, literally and figuratively. They forget that the strongest walls are not made of steel but of experience, trust, and courage." And with that, life continued. I threw myself deeper into the foundation's work, launching new programs for seniors who had been exploited or neglected. Each success, each story of recovery, became a shield against the fear the anonymous caller tried to instill. Then, during one particularly busy afternoon coordinating a major retreat, I received an unexpected visitor, someone who had been a minor player in Mark and Amber's circle years ago, but had unexpectedly reached out for assistance. Their story was complicated, tinged with regret, and hinted at knowledge of the mysterious threats I had received. Sergio, who accompanied me, advised caution. "Grandma, don't trust easily. People from that circle often have hidden agendas." But I sensed sincerity. We listened as the visitor recounted small details, ways the anonymous figure had tried to manipulate and intimidate others. It became clear that these threats were not random. They were calculated, a form of lingering control from those who had once believed they could dominate me. I realized then that my past, though full of betrayal and manipulation, had equipped me for this exact moment. I wasn't helpless, I wasn't naive, and I wasn't alone. The foundation, my allies, and my own inner strength were formidable barriers against anyone trying to disrupt my life. Yet, I couldn't ignore the tension growing in the background. The threats were no longer just calls or letters. They hinted at direct action. And I understood that if we didn't act preemptively, the next encounter could be more dangerous. Just as I started planning the final safeguards, a small envelope slid under my office door. No return address. Inside was a single key, old and tarnished, and a note that read, "This unlocks what you thought was safely hidden. Are you ready to face the past?" I picked up the key with trembling hands, feeling its cold metal against my fingers. I knew immediately that it wasn't just a key. It was a symbol, a challenge, and possibly a trap. My mind raced back through decades of experiences, the manipulations of Mark and Amber, the betrayals disguised as loyalty, the lessons I had painfully learned. I was ready. Sergio and Victor stood beside me, their presence reassuring. "Are you sure about this?" Victor asked. "It could be dangerous. Whoever left this might be watching every move." "I've never been more certain of anything," I said firmly. "The past has shaped us, but it doesn't control us. If there's something hidden, something left unresolved, I will face it head on. I refuse to let fear dictate my life again." The key fit perfectly into an old safe tucked away in the back of my private office, one I had forgotten even existed, a relic from the earliest days of my business. Slowly, I turned it, holding my breath as the lock clicked open. Inside, there were papers, photographs, and a small, leather-bound journal. As I flipped through the journal, I recognized handwriting I hadn't seen in decades, my late husband's. The entries were detailed, revealing decisions, plans, and warnings he had made for me in case anyone tried to exploit or manipulate me after he was gone. He had anticipated everything: financial abuse, family betrayal, even threats from distant associates who might try to destabilize my businesses. Each page was a reminder that I had inherited not just a legacy of wealth, but a legacy of protection and foresight. Sergio examined the papers carefully, noting how thorough the preparations had been. "Mrs. Montgomery, your husband left you more than money. He left you a blueprint for security, both legally and personally. And it's clear you've been following it, consciously or not." I smiled softly, a quiet warmth spreading through me. "Yes, and now, thanks to everything I've endured, I understand fully what it means to combine knowledge, vigilance, and courage," Victor added, "and no one, past, present, or future, will catch you off guard again. You've built walls stronger than steel, and allies who are steadfast." As the weeks passed, the anonymous threats ceased. It became clear that whoever had tried to intimidate me had realized they were up against someone they could never control. The foundation continued to flourish, and the Reclaim Your Life retreats grew even more successful. Survivors of elder abuse came from across the country to learn, heal, and reclaim their independence. Leo remained a constant presence, learning not only about the business but about resilience, integrity, and compassion. Lily, too, cautiously rebuilt her connection with me, guided by her own understanding of the past. Slowly, the fractured bonds of our family began to mend, though I never forced reconciliation. Trust, I had learned, could not be demanded, it could only be earned. Years later, I would reflect on that tumultuous period of my life. The betrayal, the confrontation, the threats, and the eventual triumph. I realized that every painful moment had strengthened me, refined my understanding of human nature, and taught me the invaluable lesson of setting boundaries. Love alone was not enough, respect and integrity were equally essential. I often stood on the balcony of my penthouse, watching the sun rise over the city, feeling a profound sense of peace. I had reclaimed my voice, my agency, and my life. I had learned that being alone was not synonymous with being lonely, and that sometimes the family we choose, friends, colleagues, and those who share our values, can be stronger than the one we are born into. Most importantly, I had discovered the extraordinary power of courage. Courage to confront betrayal, courage to take decisive action, courage to build anew even when the world had tried to tear me down. And courage, I knew, was what allowed me to transform pain into purpose, suffering into empathy, and hardship into strength. The Serenity Shores Resort had become more than a hotel. It was a sanctuary, a place of empowerment and healing, where luxury met restoration and survivors found dignity. The foundation, too, had become a living testament to resilience, a beacon for those who had once felt powerless. Mark and Amber faded from my life entirely. Their attempts to manipulate or reconnect were met with firm boundaries and quiet resolve. I no longer needed them, and their absence no longer brought sorrow. The true inheritance I had gained was clarity, the knowledge that I could protect myself, nurture the people who mattered, and create a life guided by respect, love, and purpose. As I closed the journal that had lain hidden for decades, I felt a surge of gratitude for the journey. Every struggle, every betrayal, every challenge had led me to this place of peace and empowerment. I had become the woman I was always meant to be, strong, wise, and unshakably in control of her own destiny. And in that moment, I understood the ultimate truth: life's trials are not punishments, but lessons. And the greatest victories are often born from the courage to face them head on. The story, while born of personal struggle, became a beacon of hope for countless others. And I knew, deep in my heart, that the best chapters of life were not about avoiding hardship. They were about how boldly you rose after it.